Hello, dear YouTube viewers. I hope you're doing well. Okay, let's start our video. Passengers filed slowly through the narrow aisle, balancing carry-ons and boarding passes, a collage of different ages, accents, and lives converging in the same pressurized tube. Business travelers scrolled through emails before takeoff. Families corralled excited children toward their seats, and elderly couples moved with deliberate care. Each row filled with chatter and the shuffle of luggage being forced into overhead bins. In the middle of it all, the woman assigned to seat 13F moved quietly, offering no smiles, no greetings, sliding into her place against the window as though she wanted the fabric of the seat to swallow her. She kept her eyes lowered whenever another passenger glanced her way, nodding politely if someone's shoulder brushed hers, but never inviting conversation. When the man in the aisle seat tried a casual remark about the weather, she responded with only a brief murmur and turned toward the oval window, making it clear she wished to be left alone. Every gesture carried an economy of motion, a deliberate effort to disappear into the anonymity of a crowded plane. Inside her head, though, the silence was deceptive. Thoughts clicked in order like pieces of machinery. She counted the exits without looking, noted the placement of uniformed crew, measured the pace of boarding. Old habits she had no right to keep anymore, refused to let go. She reminded herself she wasn't supposed to be here as anyone other than a passenger, just another name on the manifest, but the discipline of years resisted the disguise. The captain's voice crackled over the speakers, cheerful and routine, welcoming everyone on board, describing the smooth flight ahead. Passengers relaxed into the expected normalcy, tugging at seat belts and adjusting headrests. The woman in 13F did the same, mimicking their casualness, yet beneath the cover of her sleeve her fingers brushed the face of her watch. The adjustment was tiny, almost invisible, but exact to the second. It was the kind of motion that belonged not to a tourist or a businesswoman, but to someone who had learned to measure time the way others measure air. The hum of the engines had settled into a steady lull, lulling some passengers into sleep while others busied themselves with movies or books. A child pressed his face to the window, pointing excitedly at something glinting in the distance. At first, no one paid attention, but then the glint became a shape, sleek, sharp-edged, unmistakably military. Another followed, sliding into position on the opposite wing. Gasps rippled through the cabin as two F-22 Raptors cut through the sky, their silver bodies menacing against the blue. Passengers craned necks and whispered frantically. Some clutched armrests, certain this meant danger, a hijacking, or worse. A woman a few rows up demanded answers from a flight attendant who struggled to keep her voice calm. The intercom chimed, and the captain's voice, steady but too rehearsed, filled the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, there's no cause for alarm. The aircraft you see outside are United States Air Force F-22s. They're simply providing an escort. His pause betrayed him, a thin crack in the comm. He added quickly, "It's standard procedure. Nothing to worry about." But the tension in his tone told a different story. All around, panic whispered under the surface. But in seat 13F there was no fear. The woman leaned slightly, eyes narrowing, studying the Raptors as though she were evaluating them, not fearing them. Her heartbeat remained steady, her posture relaxed, almost as if she had been expecting them. Where others saw a threat, she saw a pattern. For a moment, the reflections in the window shifted into memory. The roar of jet engines filled her ears, not from the outside world, but from the past. She saw herself walking across the polished floor of a hangar, flight suit zipped tight, helmet cradled under one arm. The air smelled of jet fuel. The ground vibrated with the power of machines built for war. A crew chief had shouted her call sign, and she had answered with the confidence of someone who belonged among giants. Then the vision slipped away, leaving only the Raptors outside, keeping silent pace with the civilian plane. Her lips pressed into a line, unreadable. To everyone else, this was a nightmare at 35,000 feet. To her, it was recognition. A sudden burst of static cracked through the cabin speakers, interrupting the steady rhythm of engine noise and murmured conversations. At first it was only garbled sound, the kind of interference that usually meant a crew member had brushed the wrong switch. Then words broke through, sharp and clipped. carrying the metallic tone of a military channel. Eagle 1 to command, visual confirmed. Do we have? A pause, then clear. Confirm, call sign Valkyrie aboard. The cabin froze. Heads turned toward the ceiling, toward each other, trying to make sense of what they had just heard. The word lingered like smoke, heavy and unfamiliar to most. Call sign. A name. A code. Murmurs broke out in every row. Questions darting between strangers who, only minutes ago, had ignored one another. Did they say Valkyrie? Someone whispered. What does that mean? Another muttered, eyes wide. Are we carrying some kind of fugitive? Speculation spread like wildfire, panic feeding on confusion. Parents pulled children closer. Businessmen who had been cool and composed now glanced nervously at the windows, where the Raptors still held formation. In 13F, the woman's fingers tightened around the armrest, her composure cracking just enough to betray the truth. Her back stiffened, jaw set, the smallest flicker of tension crossing her face. She hadn't expected the call sign to follow her here, hadn't expected it to surface in a place where she was supposed to be invisible. The word Valkyrie cut through her carefully constructed anonymity, stripping away the mask of an ordinary passenger. For the first time since boarding, her calm eyes shifted, scanning the cabin as if calculating escape routes, or measuring how long before questions turned directly toward her. She didn't speak, didn't confirm, but in her silence was recognition. They had found her. Whispers chased the word through the cabin, but the woman in 13F barely heard them. The sound of Valkyrie had already pulled her backward, into a world she had tried to bury. Memories came in fragments, sharp, fast, like the cut of wind across an open cockpit. She saw herself younger, standing on the tarmac under a punishing sun, helmet tucked under her arm, the American flag snapping above the base. A voice from that day echoed, Valkyrie, you're cleared for takeoff. Her call sign had been chosen for a reason, mythic, untouchable, the one who flew where others fell. Among her peers, she was the pilot who always returned, no matter how impossible the mission. Classified skies, missions that never made headlines, slipping through hostile airspace at midnight, guiding her squadron through storms of fire. Once, she had flown half a crippled jet across an ocean, landing on fumes when others swore it couldn't be done. Her legend grew inside briefing rooms and hangars, whispered with awe, half believed until she proved it true again and again. But legends have breaking points. The last mission was never spoken of openly, even in her own mind. A strike gone wrong, coordinates scrambled, allies cut down before they had a chance. The enemy had been waiting, as if tipped off. She remembered fire in the sky, alarm screaming, her wingman's voice cut off mid-word. She remembered the choice, stay and die, or eject into the unknown. She had chosen survival, but survival came at a cost. The report had called her missing in action, her name etched onto a list of those never expected to return. The world moved on, assuming she had been swallowed by enemy territory or the sea. Now, years later, she sat pressed against the cabin wall of a commercial airliner, nothing more than a passenger to those around her. Yet with a single word, Valkyrie, the past she had outrun was back, and the Raptors outside were proof that the military hadn't forgotten. They still remembered the ghost pilot, who was never supposed to be here. The cabin had turned into a hive of whispers, buzzing louder with every passing minute. Strangers leaned across aisles to trade hurried theories, their voices low but urgent. Some insisted she had to be dangerous. Why else would fighter jets flank a passenger plane? Others, more awestruck than fearful, murmured that maybe she was a war hero, someone legendary who had survived battles no one else could. The unease sharpened when a man a few rows back stood abruptly, his voice cutting through the quiet. She's a spy, isn't she? That's what this is. They're here for her. His finger jabbed in the direction of 13F, his eyes wide, wild with panic. She's putting all of us at risk. Gasps followed, a ripple of fear that spread faster than any reassurance. Flight attendants rushed to intervene, their faces stretched into polite masks, hands raised as though soothing children. Sir, please, sit down. Everything is under control. But their tight voices betrayed how little control they actually had. All the while, The woman in 13F said nothing. She didn't protest, didn't defend herself. She let the accusations hang in the air, her silence fueling the storm around her. Every breath of restraint, every steady look at the seat in front of her only deepened the mystery. To the passengers, she became a paradox, both a threat and a shield, the source of their fear and the figure they couldn't stop staring at. Curiosity swelled, suspicion sparked, admiration flickered in nervous glances. The tension thickened, pressing against the cabin walls until it felt like the air itself was charged. In that sealed space, 35,000 feet above the earth, her presence was no longer invisible. It was a storm, silent yet undeniable, contained within the fragile shell of a commercial jet. The hum of the plane faded, replaced in her mind by the deafening roar of afterburners. The present dissolved, and she was back in the cockpit, visor down, gloved hands steady on the throttle. The night sky stretched black and endless, broken only by the blinking green of her squadron flying tight formation. The mission had been covert, deep inside hostile territory, their objective clear but classified. Hit a hidden installation and get out before radar could pin them down. At first, everything went according to plan. Voices over comms were crisp, confident, the familiar banter of pilots who trusted one another with their lives. But then came the shift, subtle at first, an enemy response far too fast, as if their every move had been anticipated. Anti-air fire lit up the darkness, forcing them into evasive maneuvers they hadn't planned for. She barked commands, trying to hold the formation together, but the trap was already sprung. The betrayal revealed itself in fragments, a call that should have guided them safe, instead leading them into the deadliest crossfire, a hesitation in the voice of someone she had trusted. In her gut, she knew one of her own had tipped the enemy. Her wingman, call sign Ghost, stayed close, covering her as explosions shredded the sky. Together they fought, their raptors twisting and diving through a storm of missiles and tracers. The dogfight was chaos incarnate, enemy jets swarming like shadows, their movements too precise, too prepared. She remembered Ghost's last words, calm even as alarms screamed in both cockpits. Valkyrie break. I've got you covered. He pulled hard into the path of an incoming missile, sacrificing himself to buy her seconds. The fireball that followed seared itself into her memory, the shockwave rattling her aircraft as if the world itself had ended. Her own jet took a hit, hydraulics gone, warning lights blaring. She fought the controls, teeth clenched, until the systems gave out. With no choice left, she pulled the ejection handle. The violent rush of air tore her from the burning wreck, sending her spinning into the dark. The last thing she saw before blacking out was her squadron scattering, voices breaking apart over the comms. Her own name shouted, and then cut short. From that moment on, she was gone, presumed dead. The tone wasn't suspicion. It wasn't hostility. It was respect, pure, unshaken military respect. The tension in the cabin shifted like a tide. Where fear had pooled thick, awe now began to spread. Passengers who moments ago thought she was a danger now looked at her differently. Not a fugitive, not a spy. A legend sitting among them, alive and real. In seat 13F, the woman set the handset back into its cradle with precise care. Her face remained calm, her eyes unreadable, but inside the storm of the past and the weight of recognition pressed hard. There was no hiding anymore. Valkyrie had returned, and the world knew it. The plane jolted without warning, trays rattling, drinks spilling as turbulence ripped through the cabin. Passengers clutched armrests and gasped, some letting out frightened cries. The captain's voice came over the speaker, urging calm, but the tremor in his tone only deepened the unease. Then came the silence, the kind of silence that wasn't natural at 35,000 feet. The steady stream of ATC chatter, the constant lifeline between aircraft and ground, suddenly cut out. The radio hissed with static and then went dead. Outside the windows, the Raptors broke formation, banking hard with predatory precision. Their sudden shift set the cabin buzzing again. This wasn't part of a routine escort anymore. Moments later, a shadow appeared in the distance, closing fast. Not commercial, not scheduled. An unidentified aircraft pushing into restricted airspace. The F-22s locked into intercept patterns, their sleek silhouettes slicing the sky. But the threat kept advancing. Inside the cabin, passengers murmured prayers, some pressing their faces to the windows to catch glimpses of the unfolding standoff. In 13F, the woman felt her stomach tighten, not from fear, but from calculation. She knew better than anyone how vulnerable a commercial jet was in a confrontation like this. No countermeasures, no speed, no way to dodge what could be coming. The passengers around her might not grasp it fully yet, but she did. If the unidentified craft meant harm, they were sitting ducks. Her eyes flicked from the Raptors outside to the seatbelt buckle in her lap, her mind already racing ahead of the unfolding crisis. The time for silence was ending. This wasn't just turbulence anymore. This was a threat only Valkyrie understood. Her hands tightened around the armrest, knuckles white, but her expression remained composed. Years of instinct, drilled into her from countless missions, surged forward. The quiet passenger was gone. In her place was Valkyrie, the pilot who had danced through enemy fire, the strategist who had survived when others didn't. She leaned toward the flight deck, voice steady, cutting through the cabin noise. "Captain, listen carefully. Banking left 20 degrees. Reduce throttle by 10%. Maintain altitude until the Raptors guide you through. Keep the flaps at 30. Don't exceed structural limits. They'll provide cover, but we need to make ourselves a harder target." The captain froze for a moment, eyes wide behind the controls, then nodded. "Understood, Valkyrie. Executing your instructions." Passengers, unaware of the technical precision behind her commands, watched the transformation with a mixture of awe and disbelief. The woman who had hidden behind a book and a neutral expression was now issuing instructions, like a seasoned commander directing a squadron in combat. Her posture, her voice, every measured gesture radiated authority. Outside the windows, the F-22s adjusted their formations, banking in perfect synchronization, waiting for the instructions that only she could provide. Valkyrie's mind ran through patterns, predicting every possible move, every threat vector, every response. For the first time, the cabin was silent in respect rather than fear. Everyone sensed it. This passenger was no ordinary traveler. Even the elite fighter pilots flying outside deferred to her judgment, trusting her experience implicitly. The storm that had been contained within the cabin now took form in action. Valkyrie had claimed control, not through title or rank, but through skill, knowledge, and the sheer authority of a life spent in skies where hesitation meant death. The quiet C-13F had become the command center of survival. Through the cockpit windows of the commercial plane, the approaching shape grew more distinct. A shadow at first, sleek and angular, moving faster than any normal aircraft should. The F-22s flanked the passenger jet, sensors tracking, missiles armed, yet a strange anomaly rippled across their displays. Radar locks flickered and disappeared as if the hostile aircraft had vanished from every tracking system at once. A murmur ran through the cabin as passengers peered out, trying to make sense of the impossible. Some whispered, "What is that?" Others clutched the seats, unaware that the danger was far beyond their understanding. Valkyrie's eyes narrowed, scanning not with panic, but with calculation. She had faced this before, stealth technology designed to confuse, disorient, and outmaneuver even the most advanced fighter jets. She recognized the subtle patterns in the enemy's approach, slight shifts in altitude, micro-adjustments in velocity, the rhythm of evasive maneuvers disguised as randomness. "Captain," she said crisply, leaning forward, "they're playing with radar reflection. They'll make it seem like they're everywhere and nowhere at once. We need to stay predictable but avoid linear patterns. Keep a steady climb. Don't turn sharply. Let the Raptors draw them out." Her knowledge bought crucial seconds. The F-22 pilots, already struggling against the stealth aircraft's erratic movements, adjusted according to her insight, trusting her experience implicitly. Valkyrie's calm, methodical guidance turned confusion into strategy. For the passengers, it was chaos outside the window, but inside, a quiet command presence held firm. Valkyrie's mind raced ahead, calculating possibilities, predicting maneuvers, and countering an enemy that seemed almost supernatural. Every second she bought meant survival. Every instruction she gave edged them closer to safety. The unseen enemy was clever, but Valkyrie had faced clever before. Her eyes, steady and precise, tracked patterns the rest couldn't see, and in that recognition lay the key to keeping everyone alive. The hum of the cabin faded once again as her mind drifted backward, years into a past she had long tried to leave behind. She was back in a classified hangar, fluorescent lights bouncing off polished metal, the smell of fuel thick in the air. The mission had been top secret, an experimental aircraft program developed under layers of clearance and silence. The jet she faced now, the one haunting the skies outside, was a prototype she had once studied. It hadn't been random then, and it wasn't random now. The betrayal that had marked her disappearance years ago had centered on this very program. Allies she had trusted had fed critical information to an adversary, leaving her isolated in hostile territory, her extraction delayed, her name written off. Every calculated move of this aircraft now, every stealth maneuver, felt like a ghost of that past betrayal, an echo of the trap she had narrowly escaped. Her pulse quickened, not with fear, but with the sharp edge of personal stakes. This wasn't just about passengers or protocol anymore. This was unfinished business, a reckoning she had avoided for years. Her mind raced through old debriefs, flight schematics memorized long ago, analyzing every possible weakness, every likely behavior of the rogue craft. The past collided with the present. The shadow in the sky wasn't merely a threat to the plane. It was a direct link to the moment she had disappeared, the moment she had been written off as gone forever. She wasn't just fighting to survive. She was confronting a ghost from her own history, a betrayal that had left her alive but marked. Valkyrie's jaw tightened. Recognition gave her clarity, and clarity gave her power. She would not let history repeat itself. This time, she would control the outcome. The cabin was a strange mix of tension and awe. Some passengers clutched armrests, white-knuckled and wide-eyed, their faces etched with fear. Others watched her with a different expression, a mixture of fascination and admiration, as if they were witnessing someone perform feats they had only heard about in stories. Whispers of her call sign, of her deeds, floated between rows like an invisible current. A small voice broke through the low hum of panic. A child, no older than 7, tugged at his mother's sleeve and pointed toward 13F. Are you a superhero? For the first time since the flight began, a flicker of warmth crossed her face. Her lips curved into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. It wasn't boastful or theatrical. It was gentle, human, a soft acknowledgement of the child's innocence and wonder. The mother smiled nervously, placing a hand over the child's shoulder, but the young boy's eyes never left her. In that fleeting moment, the rigid, tactical presence of Valkyrie softened just enough to show the person beneath the legend. She had survived impossible odds, faced betrayal, and commanded elite pilots, yet she could still meet curiosity and fear with calm reassurance. Passengers, sensing the subtle shift, relaxed slightly. The storm of tension in the cabin didn't vanish, but it had room now for respect and trust. Even as the threat loomed inside, she had forged a quiet connection, reminding everyone that behind the call sign and the history was a human being, capable of courage, empathy, and quiet grace. The child's wide-eyed gaze seemed to convey what no words could: wonder, trust, and the belief that even in terrifying moments, someone extraordinary was looking out for them. Valkyrie leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as she studied the positions of the F-22s and the rogue aircraft closing in. Every angle, every vector, every subtle change in speed was accounted for in her mind. She took a steady breath, then spoke clearly into the intercom. "Falcon Leader, initiate the double lattice maneuver. Bring the Raptors into a staggered formation, 2 units high, 3 units wide. Force the target to brake pattern. Timing is critical. Hold your altitude until I confirm." A moment of hesitation rippled over the comms. Even elite pilots trusted their instincts, and this was risky. No standard procedure covered what she was asking. Then came the response, clipped, professional, but edged with acknowledgement. "Copy that, Valkyrie. Executing." Outside, the formation shifted as if on cue. The rogue jet reacted, forced by her calculated positioning into revealing itself fully. It broke its cloak, leaving a trail of heat signatures and sharp contrails, that streaked the sky. The enemy, thinking it held the advantage, now exposed its weaknesses to her expert eye. Passengers pressed closer to the windows, their collective breath held. The sky erupted into a chaotic ballet, sleek jets twisting, banking, and diving with precision that made their stomachs twist in tandem. Explosions of vapor trails and afterburners illuminated the clouded horizon, each movement choreographed by Valkyrie's commands. From her seat, she monitored every shift, every micro-adjustment. Her voice remained calm, a steady anchor amid the chaos. The F-22 pilots executed each maneuver flawlessly, trusting not just her experience, but the legend that had reached them years ago. The ghost pilot who survived when no one else could. In the cabin, the tension was electric, eyes wide at the unfolding spectacle. Through Valkyrie's tactical brilliance, the impossible became manageable, the threat visible and containable. Every passenger, knowingly or not, was witnessing history in motion. The quiet passenger in 13F, directing aerial combat as if she were born for the sky. The rogue jet, caught in the precise formation orchestrated by Valkyrie, had nowhere left to maneuver. Its movements grew frantic, reactive rather than strategic, as the F-22s methodically closed the net around it. Valkyrie's mind raced, calculating every possible escape route the enemy might attempt, and blocking them all without unnecessary risk. "Falcon Leader," she said calmly over the intercom, "initiate containment protocol Alpha 3. Do not engage lethally. We cannot risk the civilians below or the passengers aboard." Her voice was unwavering, each word a command and a reassurance. The F-22 pilots, seasoned and disciplined, executed the maneuver flawlessly. The rogue jet, seeing no path of escape, finally slowed. Its systems jammed, forced into a controlled descent. Valkyrie's guidance had neutralized the threat completely, without a single civilian casualty, without a single life lost on the passenger plane she had sworn to protect. For a heartbeat, silence reigned inside the cabin. Passengers, still pressed against their seats or the windows, stared in stunned disbelief at the calm that had replaced chaos. Then, almost spontaneously, applause erupted, tentative at first, then growing louder, as if the cabin itself were honoring the quiet authority of the woman in 13F. Eyes met hers, expressions mingling relief, admiration, and awe. The child who had called her a superhero grinned, clapping furiously, while adults exchanged astonished looks, whispering about the impossible things they had just witnessed. Valkyrie allowed herself a small nod, a subtle acknowledgement of both the pilots outside and the passengers inside. She didn't smile broadly. This was never about recognition, but in that gesture was the quiet satisfaction of a mission completed perfectly, of a crisis averted, and of lives protected. For the first time that day, the weight pressing on her shoulders lifted slightly, if only for a moment. The wheels of the commercial jet kissed the tarmac with a smooth, controlled thud, the escorting F-22s flanking them until the plane taxied safely toward the gate. Engines wound down, passengers exhaled collectively, some leaning back in relief, others still gripping the armrests as if they might wake to find it had all been a nightmare. Outside, the media had already swarmed the runway. Cameras clicked and flashed, microphones were thrust forward, and reporters shouted questions into the wind. Helicopters circled overhead, capturing every angle, yet inside the cabin, all eyes were on the quiet figure in 13F. As the plane came to a complete stop, passengers erupted into applause. Some stood, clapping with a mix of gratitude and admiration, while children waved eagerly. Every cheer was a recognition of the courage and skill they had witnessed of Valkyrie, who had transformed a terrifying flight into a display of unmatched heroism. She stood, collected her bag, and walked down the aisle with deliberate calm, offering no words beyond a faint nod to those who glanced at her. The passengers clapping followed her quietly, an echo of awe, respect, and relief. Outside the cabin doors, reporters shouted again, desperate for a statement. She paused for a single breath, then turned away without a word, slipping into the shadows of the terminal. Cameras and questions faded behind her. Once again, Valkyrie became the ghost she had always been, the legend who arrived, acted decisively, and vanished before the world could claim her. The applause lingered long after she disappeared, a quiet testament to the passenger who had been anything but ordinary. Thanks for watching. For more videos, please subscribe. Our channel Awesome Visual Story.